Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to begin. Minister Mohammed will join us shortly. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zipporah Berman, and I'm the chair and founder of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. Welcome to all of you here and online, especially to our speakers and the media for their participation today. As we sit comfortably here in Baku, the climate crisis gives no respite to the most vulnerable communities across the globe. Floods, droughts, severe storms, and the Amazon rainforest is on fire. We are living through the climate emergency now. The problem was set out very clearly in the leaders' speeches at the high-level segment on Tuesday. Descriptions of climate impacts, ravaging countries and regions, hurricanes in Barbados, drought in Uzbekistan, biodiversity loss in Zimbabwe, desertification in Iraq. To add to the evidence of our own eyes, scientific reports released here at COP show that the fossil fuel emissions are projected to be about 8% higher this year than in 2015, when the Paris Agreement was signed, and that 2024 is set to be the highest year on record. Good morning, Minister. This means that the world is still off track to confront this crisis, with major fossil fuel producing countries planning on producing more than 110% more fossil fuels by 2030 than would be compatible with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Fossil fuels are not only a climate risk, but also a health, security, an economic risk, and a risk to human rights, fueling deadly air pollution, biodiversity crisis, wars, and conflict, and undermining the Sustainable Development Goals globally. We're clear on the solution: the need to phase out oil, gas, and coal, the substances responsible for 86% of the emissions trapped in our atmosphere today. At COP28 last year, the need to transition away from fossil fuels was finally recognized in the climate talks, and this commitment was further solidified in the Pact for the Future in New York in September 2024. Yet finance remains the leading barrier to a just transition. Without adequate funding, low-income and climate-vulnerable countries cannot shift away from fossil fuels or build the resilience needed to face escalating climate impacts. Many developing nations are drowning in a vicious climate debt trap, which reflects the legacy of colonialism and decades of unchecked debt accumulation worsened by escalating climate vulnerabilities. A critical barrier is accessible financing for the just transition, and a critical benchmark for the fossil fuel treaty's success is its ability to catalyze the necessary financing to support vulnerable low-income nations. Communities facing sea level rises, hurricanes, and floods cannot wait. We urgently need a global plan to equitably phase out fossil fuels and manage a global just transition that is fair, fast, and financed. That's why a growing group of 14 visionary nation states is leading the effort to negotiate a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, recognizing that since last COP, both the Republic of Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia formally joined this group of countries. We'll hear today from the Honorable Professor Biman Prasad, Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji, Honorable Susanna Mohammed, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia, Dr. Maria Neira, Director of the Department of Public Health and Environment at the World Health Organization, Dr. Jwala Rambaran, independent expert and distinguished fellow of the Sustainable Finance Program at the Climate Works Foundation, and Harjeet Singh, Global Engagement Director for the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative. I turn first to the Honorable Professor Biman Prasad, Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji.
Thank you, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. The impact of the climate crisis being felt most acutely by Pacific Island nations, where rising sea levels, increasingly extreme weather events, and disrupted ecosystems threaten our homes, health, and livelihoods. This state of affairs is primarily attributable to the continued extraction and use of oil and gas. and coal. These three fossil fuels are responsible for 86% of all carbon emissions in the past decade. We are suffering staggering human and economic impacts because of greenhouse gas emissions generated primarily by wealthier, high-polluting countries. Pacific Island nations have long been effective champions of climate justice, for climate justice. Pacific nations have been the driving force behind the 1.5 degree Celsius temperature goal, behind major wins on loss and damage, and important international cases in the International Court of Justice and International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. Fiji will continue to advocate for a fair, fast, and financed transition from fossil fuels as a key element of our fight for climate justice. We will advocate in every forum we can. That requires a robust, well-resourced, and substantial finance goal here in Baku that has provisions to support all countries to exit fossil fuels. That is why we also support the proposal for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty to complement the Paris Agreement and to help us all secure the vital 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. So the idea of the fossil fuel treaty, friends, is gaining momentum amongst governments, businesses, civil society, and we actually look forward to carrying it forward with significant advances in 2025. The Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative, as we see it, is a tool to address climate injustice and drive the shift needed to achieve necessary transition to clean energy, while equitably managing the phase-out of harmful fossil fuels globally. So this proposal for a legally binding mechanism, I think very clearly presents an opportunity to hold wealthier nations accountable for their role in the crisis, while providing vulnerable nations like ours with the financial and technical support we need for the transition. It took us 28 years to finally have a decision text here at COP on transitioning away from fossil fuels, 28 years. We must ensure that this commitment is not lost in translation and reinforced in all future decisions. And the time has come to respond with greater urgency, greater focus, greater solidarity. And the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative is a key part of that response. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister. We now turn to Minister Susanna Mohammed of the Colombian government.
Thank you very much. As our colleague, Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji, has stated, the momentum for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty continues to be mobilized. We first like to thank the commitment of the 14 countries, and especially welcome in 2003 Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia. And we would like to move forward to the next phase in 2025, and in agreement in the meeting of the ministers that are part of the initiative, we have agreed to pursue resolutions at the UN General Assembly and also at the UN Environmental Assembly to increase the political momentum and the demand and need for this process. We have been also discussing, as Sephora mentioned, that the treaty will go around the potential implications of phasing out fossil fuel and the economic requirements for moving forward in that perspective. During 2024, we have had 10 additional countries participating in the discussions. The names of those countries are not publicly at the moment, but some of them are increasing the level not only of interest, but also the level of engagement. We are also working to have common positions during this COP29 as part also of the COP negotiations, especially around the Just Transition Working Program. And we are working together so that there is an ambitious collective new quantified goal for climate finance. And it's important to say that this fossil fuel treaty is an initiative to help achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement and complement the UNFCCC efforts. And we hope that in the next stage, we will be rallying and getting further commitments of other countries and moving forward in their participation in the process of discussion so that we can be at a point where we could start the negotiations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minister. And now we'll turn to Dr. Maria Neira of the World Health Organization.
Thank you very much. Of course, if we are here representing the World Health Organization and the global health community, is because the climate crisis is nothing else than a health crisis as well, and it's affecting our health in a very serious and dramatic way. And the cost of this climate crisis is already paid by our lungs. Sometimes in these discussions around the climate change, people ask us to visualize a little bit more and understand what is the face of the climate crisis. The face of the climate crisis is the fact that every year we have 7 million premature deaths caused by exposure to the polluted air we are breathing. And the reason why this is connected is because the same causes that are responsible for this global warming, the combustion of fossil fuels, are of course contributing as well and overlapping on a 75% with the causes of air pollution. So if we want to visualize how this is impacting our health, you have it there. The health of our people, the lungs of our people are full of this toxic air that we are breathing that is responsible for all of those diseases. I wanted to share with you the fact that at the moment we are talking here, and maybe this explains a little bit more why we are so concerned, some people in one place in the world is breathing an air, thank you Iris, with 400 micrograms per cubic meter of PM 2.5, which is a particulate matter that the toxicity that is going to our lungs. The recommendation of the World Health Organization will be 5 micrograms per cubic meter, 5 micrograms, and people is breathing an air that is today at 402.5. For your information, in Baku today the levels are 170 micrograms per cubic meter. This is the every day you can go and check. This is called Breathe Life, and it's for free in WHO. You can go and check the level, the quality of the air you are breathing in your city and your country, and then you can definitely know what the combustion of fossil fuels represent for your health. And if people say there are economic reasons why we cannot transition on a different speed and with more ambition to green sources of energy, you can tell them that the price is already paid by our hospitals, and then the bill is really huge, and our lungs are the ones that are paying the biggest bill. And it's not just our lungs, by the way, all our body is affected by all of that. So I think that the call from the health community is very important. Accelerate transition in a way go for phasing out fossil fuels because it's a question of life or death. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nira. And now we turn to Dr. Jwala Rambaran on debt and transition finance.
Thank you very much. And as we sit here, it is clear that it would be difficult to have a global just energy transition without addressing the debt situation in the global South countries. Because 40 years after the debt crisis of the 1980s, global South countries are again facing a widespread sovereign debt crisis that threatens to erase several of their development gains. If we look at some of the statistics, external debt of low and middle-income countries, excluding China, has almost doubled relative to 2010. We're now somewhere close to about $6.5 trillion in debt. And not only has debt grown tremendously, but the composition of that debt has also changed and in a more complex way. We've moved away from borrowing from the traditional Paris Club group of creditors and more towards the private creditors. And that, of course, means that we're looking at high-cost debt. And as we look at high-cost debt, it means that debt service payments have also increased. As a matter of fact, they've doubled over the last decade, and this has begun to crowd out the investment that's needed to deal with climate and development in many countries. We now have 18 developing countries that have actually defaulted on their debts between 2020 and 2023, and this is now more than the total of the previous 2 decades. So it is clear that this global South debt crisis cannot be resolved unless we start thinking about how we change the global financial architecture. Now, it is not that developing countries have been sitting idly by and not attempting to find solutions. A number of novel financial solutions have been put forward: climate resilient debt clauses, catastrophe bonds, and debt swaps. And the fossil fuel treaty has actually done some tremendous research on this. You will see this, it's available on our website for further reading. But what is clear is that we cannot, apart from using these innovative financial solutions, we need to have a sovereign debt mechanism that allows for all parties to come to the table to negotiate their debt. And that is why the treaty has an important role to play in enabling transition finance for global South countries by helping broker what we call a new debt resolution facility, at least in the short to medium term, where countries who are actually members of the treaty and even others who are willing to join could come together in a more inclusive, safe space to deal with how they restructure their debt. And as that happens over the longer term, we could now build out to where we have a sovereign debt restructuring mechanism that is really more multilateral and based, and more preferably under the auspices of the United Nations. At the end of the day, there are many calls that have been put forward to develop a more fit-for-purpose global financial architecture to address the intersecting debt and climate crises. And here, in principle, the treaty initiative could play an important role, again, in supporting several of these proposals. We have the Bridgetown Initiative that has been put forward by Prime Minister Motley. We have the Accra to Marrakesh agenda that has been put forward by the V20 group. And most recently, we have Pope Francis, who has designated 2025 to be a jubilee year in which debts are forgiven. And I think there's a lot of room here for the treaty to support several of these initiatives so that we could really start moving forward to a global just energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And all of those research reports can be found at fossilfueltreaty.org. And finally, Harjeet Singh, the Global Partnerships Director for the Fossil Fuel Treaty. Harjeet.
Excellencies, delegates, and friends, you've heard how we have gained momentum over the last few years, and we have 14 nations now leading this diplomatic initiative, which has a lot of support from the ground. And I would like to briefly touch upon the engagements that we had with other stakeholders, and that's continuing. You must have seen the encouragement that we got when we had endorsement from Ban Ki-moon, the former UN Secretary General. We had indigenous nations of the Amazon, including the Waorani nation, which is part of the effort to secure the exit of extraction in the Yasuni region in Ecuador. We have about 120 cities and subnationals who have supported, including the first capital city in Africa, Lilongwe of Malawi. We have Philadelphia, which also endorsed in September, joining the states of California and Hawaii, stand against expansion of fracking and the wrecking of Trump that's going to happen even more. So we have 600 faith organizations carrying the message during the season of creation this year again. We have businesses coming forward. We have about 25 banks from the Global Alliance on Banking Values who have come forward. Yesterday we had Dr. Andrew Forrest offering his significant support and inviting the business sector to support. We have about 1 million people now signing on to support this initiative. So we have a great groundswell support that we got for this treaty to support countries who are leading this initiative. And I must very briefly mention that there are, of course, we are hearing concerns on what's happening here in the conference rooms on the issue of finance. Of course, there are many initiatives, as Dr. Jwala mentioned, on the outside, but we must protect this process. We know it has been painfully slow. We know it's not ambitious enough. We know it's not tackling the cause, but this is exactly where treaty plays a very complementary role, as you already heard from Minister Susanna and Professor Prasad, that we need to go hand in hand, and that's where treaty can really support the work that's happening on the new collective quantified goal, or be it NDCs, be it just transition work program, or other aspects of loss and damage. So it's really a time for us to make all our efforts to bring these two processes together, to complement each other, to actually deal with the cause of the problem and the consequences that we are facing, and that's the effort we are making through this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harjeet. And thank you very much to all of our speakers. The press room has been kind enough to extend us a couple of minutes so we can take journalist questions now. I'll take 3 in a batch, and then we'll see if we have time for more. I see these 3 hands. Please identify yourself as well.
My name is Leon Lidigu from Nation Media Group in Kenya. Thank you. My name is Leon Lidigu from Nation Media Group in Kenya. For the last 6 months, I've been conducting an investigation just looking into why African countries are not getting onto the fossil fuel treaty as we would expect them to. And I spoke to mothers, for example, in Kibera slums, who use plastics for cooking because they don't have sorts of an alternative source of fuel. And most of them kept on asking me, you guys keep on telling us to transition, but to what? So I just want to know from the experts, what solutions are you putting on the table when you're telling people to transition? Because the resultant effect is that when these mothers use the plastics for cooking, I conducted spirometry tests on a number of children. They were horrible. You see black mucus, you see a lot of things that end up endangering their health. My second question goes to Mr. Jwala Rambaran.
Sorry, Liam, we're just going to have to take 1 for now, and
Okay.
then thank you very much.
Thank you.
I saw 2 other hands here. Yeah, right there.
Thank you. Thais Gadelara from Climatica. Well, in US, Donald Trump is going to be the next president, and probably he's going to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. Argentina decided to withdraw its delegation from this COP, and probably is going to follow the same path of Trump. And both are countries that depends a lot on fossil fuels, so I would like to know, how do you see that could impact on the goal of the treaty, and also what would be your response to these possible 2 decisions? Thank you.
Thank you. One final question was over here. Yeah.
John Ainger from Bloomberg News. Bringing things back to negotiations a little bit, can you elaborate a little bit more on what you would like to see in terms of the GST outcomes agreed last year, particularly paragraph 28 and transitioning away from fossil fuels at the end of this year's talks? And what do you say to those countries that are pushing back against that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to the Deputy Prime Minister from Fiji, if you would like to address any of those questions first, and then Minister Susanna Mohammed.
Yeah, I thought that was a very good question, transition to what? And as I said very clearly, we continue to advocate for a fair, fast, and financed transition from fossil fuels to as a key element, because you're absolutely right. You know, if the transition is not financed, if the transition doesn't provide clear alternatives, which would require finance to do that, whether we're shifting to more sources of renewable energy for use by our communities. So my answer to that would be, that's a very good question, but we need a finance transition. I think in terms of countries that might retreat from the Paris Agreement or the UNFCCC process, the Paris Agreement has been in force for almost 10 years, and we hope that it will not be easy, and it will not be something that countries would want to withdraw, because a lot of work has already been done, whether we like it or not. So we can be hopeful that that process, that countries will continue to be part of the UNFCCC process, and elements within the Paris Agreement will be taken on board.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. Minister Mohammed?
Thank you so much. First, I would like to say that the energy transition has to have people at the center. If the most vulnerable people are not the center of this climate transition, precisely the political backlash could provide a situation where a political process will empower people against the reality of climate change. So this false division that they are trying to create between the need for the change of the unfair development model and environment, this false division where actually they put environment against the people, is one of the sources of authoritarianism right now in our world. And we have to escape that trap that those that actually want to accumulate more power and destroy democracies are trying to put people against the environment. And that's a big challenge, because at the same time, what we're seeing in this COP29 is that we need solidarity and fairness in the process of financing this transition. When we said in Dubai that we were gonna triple renewables, the question remains, who's gonna triple renewables and for whom? And right now, the numbers are showing that, for example, it has expanded faster, the renewable, there's more solar panels in a country like Belgium than the whole of Africa. Especially where in Africa is actually where there's more population without access to electricity. And the renewable solution could bring fast, cheap capacity to electrify those most vulnerable communities, matching social inclusion with the environmental transition. By not doing so, we are creating a social backlash and a political space for authoritarian and deniers of climate change. And I think this is something that is serious in political terms, and is also at stake here at COP29 in the financial discussion. That's why it's very important that the fair transition and an economic pact can be defined. We cannot continue playing with the same financial rules of the game, which are leaving developing countries behind and creating this political danger. And that's actually part of the essence of the discussion we're having here at COP29, where with the new financial goal for the Paris Agreement. And that's what will make Article 28 live. And so I am so sorry that the Argentinian delegation cannot be here discussing from their political perspective, because there is nothing more dangerous than not having a forum where all nations can discuss, negotiate, prioritize, and of course also where the geopolitics is present. So it shows actually that perspective of denying the problem, but it's a smoke mirror. It's denying the problem to pursue an economic model that is in favor of those that continuing have the power right now. And that's also part of the role of this fossil fuel treaty, which is about engaging in a multilateral process of fair negotiation for a just transition. So we continue, the countries that are here, believing that it's through negotiation, not through imposition, not through fake news, not through authoritarianisms, that we can solve the humanity common problems that actually have been created by that economic model based on fossil fuels, this very unequal economic model that has created also those problems that you from Kenya are describing on the ground, and that is our common responsibility to create possibilities of solution.
Thank you so much, Minister Mohammed. We only have 2 minutes left, but Dr. Nira, you had some comments you wanted to make on the pollution question?
Yeah, just on the indoor air pollution from Kenya, absolutely fundamental, and I want to take just 30 seconds to say that because we recognize that 3 billion people at the moment in the world are cooking and preparing their meals and heating their houses and lightening their houses with, like in the Stone Age, I mean, with open fires and using, as you say, plastic or whatever is available, polluting their health and resulting on almost 4 million deaths from indoor air pollution. Because we are very conscious of that, we will have in a conference, global conference on air pollution and health that will be hosted by Colombia and the World Health Organization and many other partners, 25 to 27 of March in Cartagena de Indias in Colombia in 25. And of course, we will be looking at this transition as well on household indoor energy and how we can, through subsidies or other innovation. And of course, we are putting a lot of solar panels on our healthcare facilities as well. This multiplying by 3, the renewables, is multiplying by 3 or even more our health. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nira. And I know that I'm sure both of our finance experts have comments to make on the paragraph 28 question, as well as the need for finance. I'm going to ask people with more questions to meet them outside the room. We want to respect the time we've been given in the press conference area. I will also mention, relative to the questions on Africa, that there are several African countries who have been consistent participants in the discussion on a fossil fuel treaty, and we look forward to working with them in the future. As we've heard today, there is exciting momentum towards a new process to govern fossil fuels and a just transition. The fossil fuel treaty is an essential companion to the Paris Agreement. We need to make progress here at COP29, and we will also need a complementary treaty to manage a phase-out in a way that is fast, fair, and financed. Countries are exploring the pathway forwards, including charting a path to a potential UN General Assembly resolution or standalone negotiations process for a fossil fuel treaty that would put justice, finance, and an equitable transition at the center. We're seeing more and more countries engage in this process and expect this to continue to grow. We look forward to supporting those nations to advance an ambitious and equitable new treaty for a global just transition. Thank you so much for joining us here today.